Welcome. In this video, we're going to cover how to run an app on the DNA Nexus platform. An app is an application that was created by a developer. Now, before we start, a couple things I want to point out. I already have a project that is visible, and this is because Diana, my colleague, has shared a project with me. If you notice in the upper right, there is a notification. If I click the bell, I see that Diana made me a contributor in the project LCA. All right, let's jump right in. So here we have the reads folder that Diana has created, and she's uploaded two files. So we're going to take a sample and map it to a reference using BWA mem. So I click Start Analysis. And I'm going to do a search for BWA. Now, when I do my search, it will go through all our available apps and showcase the ones that have the word BWA in it. Now here you see we have BWA Faster Indexer, BWA Mem, and BWA Backtrack. I'm interested in BWA Mem, so I select that one. The first time you run an app on the DNA Nexus platform, you're prompted to accept the terms and conditions set by the app publisher. You can view those terms and conditions by clicking this link here. So now let's look at the BWA Mem app documentation. It'll show us basic app usage and information that's generally helpful for new users of an application. It'll also show us what's new in each revision of the app, along with upstream project information. So going back to the project, I'm going to agree and install the app. So once I agree to terms and conditions, the app configuration is displayed to me. So let's walk through really quickly and see what's going on here. First, in the upper left, we see the actual name of the app. Now for this run, we can change the actual name to say LCA BWA Mem. When we click run, this run will display as a job in the monitoring tab with the name that we've entered here. In addition to that, each box that we see here represents a file input for this app. Walking through them slowly, there is a reads input which takes in FASTQ files. If I hover over it, you see a tooltip pops up with additional information on how to use the actual app. If I hover over the gray box, tooltip pops up again. This gray box is an optional argument. This orange box is a required argument. And another one is the BWA reference genome index. I'm going to select the BWA reference genome. Now, as you can see, I have no reference genome in my current project. Diana uploaded only the reads. However, we're in luck here. DNA Nexus provides a project, a public project, that contains reference genomes, and we also pre-index with popular bioinformatic tools. So in this case, I'm going to use GRCH37, also known as the HG19. And we're going to use the BWA index. So I select that. And you can see that this rectangle is now populated with our file input of the BWA index from our public reference project. Now going back to our FASTQ inputs, I'm going to select one. And I can see that Diana uploaded the forward and reverse reads for the LCA sample. For the first parameter, I'm going to select the _1 forward read. Then the optional reverse read, I'm going to select and select the _2 FASTQ read. Now that I've selected both forward reads and an index, you can see that the app is now a runnable app. However, before I run it, I want to look at the advanced settings and go through that a bit. So these are additional configurations that are set by the creator of the app, along with some settings that all DNA Nexus apps have in common. So let's walk through slowly. First, you see the README that I showed you before. We show it here as a reference as you walk through and populate these additional configurations. So start from the top. First is a version of the app that we're going to use. As you can see, we have many versions available. We're going to use the most recent version. However, you are able to select any version that you want to. This is useful for rerunning old analysis with the same version of the app. Next, we have the name, and then we have the output folder. Now for instance type, the app developer has already set a default instance to run on. In this case, they set mem1 ssd1 x8. Now, what that means exactly, we can quickly see. If we click select, so now we're going to configure the instance type. Now, when configuring instance type, we use our terminology mem1, ssd1, x8. However, it's very easy to understand what these terms mean. For mem, we're referring to the memory on the instance that we're going to spin up. If we select mem1, we get 0.8 to 1.9 gigabytes per core. Per core is something to keep in mind. If we up our core count here, we will have more memory available. You're able to configure the memory, mem, you're able to configure the storage, and you're able to configure the cores of an instance that we spin up ultimately to run the application. App developers tend to set a useful default. However, you can always modify them in case you run into issues such as out of memory, or perhaps your data is a bit more complex and requires a specific instance type. Once you select the valid configuration, you'll notice that it allows you to update from your old configuration to your new one. In this case, we're not going to update. We're going to stick with the developer default of a mem1, ssd1, x8. Going back, we see that that is still set. Now moving on to the additional configurations for the app. These are configurations that have been exposed by the developer of the application. We're going to use the defaults, but you can always hover over and see what each configuration means and set what you feel works for your current run. In the case where you see any additional symbols you don't think quite make sense, again, look at the tooltip and it'll tell you what is going on. Now, I will tell you right now that an asterisk means this field is required. So we're going to keep the defaults the same and go back to our app configuration page. The inputs have been set. Let's briefly talk about these last two rectangles here. These are referring to the outputs of the app. Now the app outputs a BAM file and a index by file for the BAM file. So before we click run, we're going to set an output folder. This is the folder where the BAM and by file will be placed once the application is done running. So we click workflow actions and then we click set output folder. It takes us back to our folder selection view. Here we're going to create a new folder and we'll call it mappings. We add that folder. It's empty right now, but it will be populated soon. And we click select. And now we click run. So after we click run, we're taken to the monitor tab in our project. Here we see that the application is currently running and it's in the waiting state. Waiting means that it's waiting for an instance to be spun up, but once an instance is spun up, it will transition to the running state. So that's it for running a single app. In the next video, we'll talk about creating and running a workflow.